Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to go ahead and begin. وقفنا نحن at the third reason كلام جميل من أسباب التيمم. So we'll go ahead and begin inshallah ta'ala. The author says الثالث من الأسباب مرض يخاف معه من استعماله أي الماء على منفعة عضو. I'm sorry, Shaykh Ghazali, were you trying to say something?
No, I wasn't, Chef. Sorry about that. I just.
لا بأس. Now you'll see he said مرض يخاف معه. In some copies I'll have it بفتح الياء. قال على منفعة عضو بضم أوله وكسره بضم العين في لفظه عضو. You could say عضو and you can say عضو, and they are common in different Arabic cultures and how they pronounce the word. أن تذهب كأن يحصل باستعماله عمى أو خرس أو صمم إلى آخره. So what do they mean by مرض ها هنا? That the normal usage of a limb will be hindered. قال وفي المحرر والشرح, meaning الشرح الكبير العزيز, والروضة الخوف على الروح أو العضو أيضا. And saying الخوف على الروح, I mean, it'll mean the same exact thing, because if you're afraid that you're going to die, that's a level above the limb not being able to use it normally. قال وكذا بطء البرء. البرء يعني الإبراء, أن يتبرأ ويذهب عنه المرض, يعني they're already sick. However, the presence of water on that limb, right, might cause a prolonged issue with the limb, like it can't touch water. So if you put water on it, it will cause it to get irritated and not be able to function like it should. قال أو الشين الفاحش في عضو ظاهر في الأظهر. الشين, it means a disfiguration. يعني that the water might change the appearance of that limb. But there's a condition here. The limb that we're talking about here has to be, when there's disfiguration involved, عضو ظاهر, not any عضو altogether. What's the difference? If a little bit of water on your foot might cause your foot to get extra dry skin or dry out. Those are some of the common things that we run into when we're making wudu, right? The heels, they dry out, right? So, yani, would that be a reason for tayammum? They said no. Why? Because no one's going to walk around looking at your ankles or your heel, right? La. This reasoning is not strong enough for us to move right to tayammum. But what about the face? That's a problem. Okay, what about the hands? That's a problem. It is such a problem that Imam Shafi'i, speaking on these matters, people thought that he meant that taking from the beard in any way, shape, or form is haram. Famous statement. But what does Imam Shafi'i actually say in regards to this matter? I'm actually going to pull this up real quick from a Shamila. We're going to go to an because there's a lot of confusion on the topic. And once we read it, you'll realize where the, yani, how does this connect with that? Okay. Okay. So of course you have two famous spots where Imam Shafi'i, he speaks about the lihya and removing it, right? In the first one that he mentions, okay, realistically, you can't come and say that he's saying that it's haram or anything about it here, because he says this. وأحب إلي لو أخذ من لحيته وشاربيه حتى يضع من شعره شيئا لله. That part basically saying take from the beard, right? But then in the next sentence says this. وإن لم يفعل فلا شيء عليه لأن النسك إنما هو في الرأس لا في اللحية. So does not really support him saying, yani, or claiming that it's haram, right? Okay. Where is أيوة ها هنا. He's speaking about what a hakim could do as a punishment. You know, from hitting, you know, from different things. So he says this. ولو حلقه حلاق فنبت شعره كما كان أو أجود لم يكن عليه شيء. If someone cuts someone's hair and then the hair grows back and everything is fine, or it's even better, then there's no harm here, no foul. You might get upset, but beyond that, we can't say anything else, right? He says, وَالْحِلَاقُ لَيْسَ بِجِنَايَةٍ. Cutting hair is not a crime. Can't even call it an assault, technically. He said, لِأَنَّ فِيهِ نُسُكًا فِي الرَّأْسِ. As a matter of fact, there's times where for ibadah, we actually cut the hair off the head, right? Okay. وَلَيْسَ فِيهِ كَثِيرُ أَلَمٍ. And there's no pain realistically when you're just cutting hair. He said, وَإِنْ كَانَ فِي اللِّحْيَةِ لا يجوز. لا يجوز. فليس فيه كثير ألم ولا ذهاب شعر. Because it can all come back and it's not a big deal. So why does he say لا يجوز? Now, if you stop here, you'll come and say, oh, he must say هذا لا يجوز, right? But if you continue reading, he says, ولو أن رجلا حلق غير شعر الوجه والرأس فلم ينبت أي موضع كان الشعر أو من المرأة كانت فيه حكومة. Okay, ممتاز. Pretty basic and simple, right? Okay. If you flip the page, يعني, this is where the problems happen, is that we're not continuing to read what he said. So if you flip the page, he says, ولو خلقت لامرأة لحية وشاربان أو أحدهما دون الآخر فحلقهما رجل أدب. يعني, a man forcefully removed it from a woman. Yeah, she had a beard, and he forcefully did it, right? He said that man should be disciplined. وكانت عليه حكومة أقل منها في لحية الرجل. But its status is less than the beard of a man. Okay? Why? He says, لأن اللحية من تمام خلقة الرجل. Now, I actually skipped a paragraph to read that to you. So, because I want you to see how he's looking at it. He just said that the beard is part of the image of what a man is. He didn't say this is fard. Did he now? No. You see, in Imam al-Shafi'i's mind, we follow his usul. Okay, so we behave like he would behave. We understand how he would understand. If you're in between manners and etiquettes versus the Sharia told you to do so, he's not going to be speaking about manners and etiquettes. He's going to be telling you that the Sharia said so. That's how Shafi'i always is. Now let's go to the paragraph right before, so you could see even clearer statement from Imam Shafi'i. He says, فلست فيها حكومة. نعم. قال وإنما قلت إن في شعر البدن إذا لم ينبت. I said about any body hair that does not grow again. Someone cut someone's hair and it didn't grow again. Has a حكومة, punishment, fine, right? Less than that which is in the face or the head if the hair doesn't come back. Why? He said, because a man without proper hair on his head normally and a beard, okay, this makes the individual feel and be less in status. He says, جعلت في ذهبي بلا أثر في البدن لأن نبات الشعر أصح وأتم له. So Imam Shafi'i is saying, oh, this is just part of what a man should look like. Allah. This is different completely than what they're saying. Then where did the mistake happen? Well, the mistake actually can't even be found, as a matter of fact. You see, because Ibn al-Rif'a, he just says randomly, Al-Halimi said it. And then Al-Isnawi says, Ibn al-Rif'a said that, Al-Halimi said that, Al-Qaffal said that, Al-Shafi'i said it. If they're talking about these verses, these statements, because there's no others that refer to cutting and beard, then that takhrij is all wrong from beginning to end. And that would explain why everyone, even including Imam al-Nawawi, basically just disregarded the whole claim. As you can, we just read it. Kalam Jamil. And this solves the matter. And that's why I always tell people, when you're researching something, just go back to the source and read it. Why did he speak about the thing in Hajj? Basically, it goes, the mas'ala in Hajj that he spoke about, he said, goes back to this. You're in Hajj and you went and sat down at the barbershop and said, okay, do my Hajj stuff. And he cut the hair and the beard off. Would the person, the barber, would he be liable? Technically, yes. Why? Because what is part of Hajj? The beard or the head? The head. So if he said, do my Hajj stuff, it meant the head. Unless he specified, do the beard too. That's what Imam Shafi'i Aslan was speaking about. And then when he spoke about the hukumat wa gharamat, it has nothing to do with saying that the beard, and this is why Imam al-Ramli, he said in Nihaya, he said, whoever thinks that the issue of the nusuk has anything to do with that, cutting the beard is haram, then they're ridiculous. They don't know what they're talking about, because that has nothing to do with one another. Why? I'll tell you this. Could you punch yourself in the face? Masalan. Sure. Okay, let's not say face because there's a hadith, right? Okay, let's not do face. Let's do it this way. Can you punch yourself in your leg? Yes. Okay. What if it broke the bone? Well, let it break the bone. It's your leg. You're the one that's going to suffer with it, right? That's your issue. Okay, so if you punch yourself and break your bone, what does that entail? Nothing. It entails absolutely nothing. Why? Because it's your fist and your leg. Okay, then what if we get someone to hit someone else? La yajuz. لا يجوز. So I can punch my leg right now. I'm punching my thigh. Can I punch my thigh? Yes. Can someone else do that to me? لا يجوز. See what just happened there? This is why Imam al-Ramli and Ibn Hajar mentioned something very similar. They said what? They said يجوز في فعل النفس ما لا يجوز للغير أن يفعله فيك. Allahu Akbar. That's fiqh, right? That's what fiqh is all about. وَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدِ. طيب. Now let's get back to our stuff. He said, وَالْأَصْلُ فِي التَّيَمُّمِ لِلْمَرَضِ قوله تعالى وإن كنتم مرضى إلى فتيمموا إلى آخره. نعم هذا هو الأصل وهذا واضح. كلام جميل. He says until فتيمموا, وهذا دليل in that we only move away from water in its absence, right, to dirt. Nothing else. We cannot use anything else. أي حيث خفتم من استعمال الماء ما ذكر. نعم. ومقابل الأظهر, the opposing opinion says ليس في البطء والشين المذكور كبير ضرر. Okay. Bear in mind. He said أو الشين الفاحش في عضو ظاهر في الأظهر. This في الأظهر includes the last two, not the first one. كلام جميل. يعني there are opposing opinions for the two out of the three scenarios he mentioned. مرض برء and شين فاحش. That's why he's only mentioning what? Two there for you. Because there's only two. It's one of the difficult things about Minhaj is that there's a lot of scenarios where he does not specify which is which, okay, but they're included, and as you study, you get to write that on notes off to the side. He said, وَالشَّيْنُ. Now, what is shayn? He's going to define it for us. الأثر المنكر أو المنكر من تغير لون أو نحول أو استحشاف وثغرة تبقى ولحمة تزيد. So it is a change in the color. أو نحول, where the skin starts almost like hanging off the bone. أو استحشاف, يعني the muscles themselves, they actually start to change and look different from the water. It does happen. I mean, a couple of years ago, no, sorry, it was last year. I got a question from a city in Holland where it's all buildings, no homes, no farmlands, no gardens, no parks, according to the person. And they had just been diagnosed with being allergic to water if it touches their skin. So they're going to have to do tayammum. What else are they going to do? Kalam Jamil, their skin swells up, and they said it gets to the point where even an EpiPen wouldn't help. So, subhanallah. قال وثغرة تبقى, it leaves dents and holes in the skin. ولحمة تزيد, because of the swelling. قاله الرافعي في آخر الديات في أثناء تعليل, when he was speaking about the different types of diya. قال وأسقطه من الروضة. كلام جميل. He like there was no point of mentioning it again. I mean, in diyat, if you've already mentioned it in tayammum, that's probably why he did it that way. He says والظاهر, what is meant by الظاهر. He says قال الرافعي هنا ما يبدو عند المهنة. Here in tayammum, it's ما يبدو عند المهنة. Okay, غالبا كالوجه واليدين. He says وقال في الجنايات. However, in jinayat, So that's crimes basically. في الاختلاف في سلامة الأعضاء. كلام جميل. Because in order to determine would there be liability and compensation for hurting another person's يعني, body parts, basically, okay, we need to identify how that body part, how that limb, how does it behave, how does it act? Because once we have an understanding of what that limb is used for and what the person normally uses it for, then we can determine if when something is done to it, whether or not that would be something يعني, that would affect the effectiveness and the usage of that limb. Okay, so he's saying while discussing the debates there on the nature of usage of limb, he said ما يؤخذ منه أنه ما لا يكون كشفه هتكا للمروءة. What would not be considered, if unveiled, an impact on the individual's status and reputation, basically. But that actually is problematic. And I'll tell you why it's problematic, right? Is that يعني, for a female, uncovering her hand might be hetk, maybe not muru'a, but hetk, her status without a doubt. So that definition would be a problem. He says, وَقِيل مَا عَدَى الْعَوْرَةِ. Yeah, that's even more problematic. Because if you say مَا عَدَى الْعَوْرَةِ, then basically some water on this on the skin of the leg, yeah, that doesn't add up now. He says, واستشكله ابن عبد السلام. طبعا, of course, it's obvious. كلام جميل. أو سكت الإمام المحلي and he didn't comment on it. But what is correct is ما يظهر عند المهنة الوجه واليدين, because those are things that are normally exposed, even if the sister wears a niqab. Okay, these things get exposed whether you like it or not. Okay, whether it's a doctor's appointment, being pulled over by a cop, right? Going to work if she works. I mean, the list goes on. Okay. I mean, one of the most hilarious things I saw in my life was there was gardens in Egypt where it's like only girls' night out kind of thing. So women would go there to feel comfortable, and they don't wear their hijab or anything like that, or their niqab once inside. Okay, sounds great, right? Security's men. So I was like, all right, well, you're not really defeating any purposes here, and they have to make sure and confirm the people that are going in are indeed women. So we need, again, I'm not saying that she doesn't, I'm saying that the hypertension that is caused from a lot of these topics needs to ease down some, okay? Because there's a lot of irrational reactions that happen, okay? Yes, if a woman knows that someone is looking at her, it is wajib upon her to cover her face. That's the mu'tamad of the school. We even have hijab Shafi'i, right? Meaning their hijab, it's actually made by sisters in Tarim, and you can buy them and they'll ship them to you. It is per the standards of the Shafi'i school. It's a niqab basically, but it's like a one-piece niqab from head to toe with places for the arms to go through. Okay. هذا هو الأصل, but is it wajib upon her to have her face covered when she's leaving the house? That we cannot say that. If it's wajib if someone is looking at her and she knows that people can see her, yes. Beyond that, you cannot make a universal law saying that she can't poke her head out the window and look out unless she has a niqab on. That we cannot say. And there's people cause a lot of confusions, and of course they always pick on what Imam al-Bajuri said in his Hashiyah on Fath al-Qarib. He said we might need to use the da'if opinion in the school these days, What was he referring to? So there's a muqabil to the mu'tamad, right? The wajh says, if women are working side by side with men, then they should have their face and hands uncovered so you can identify one another. Imam al-Bajuri was pointing out to the fact that it's becoming more and more like that every day. So in order to function in a society, she might need to keep her face and hands uncovered. Okay, that was the argument of Imam al-Bajuri. Again, the mu'tamad has not changed. It was only that Imam al-Bajuri was hinting to, we might need to use that at times, okay, because of how life has changed. And that was, what, 100 years ago? Yani, it's 10 times more than it was back then. Of course, if our sisters want to stay covered as they ought to, especially in this day and age, then so be it. But we should not be excessively forceful because it tends to lead people away from Islam at the same time. If you can't find anything wise to say in the moment of confusion, don't say anything at all. He said, وَيَعْتَمِدُ فِي خَوْفِ مَا ذُكِرْ قَوْلُ عَدْلٍ فِي الرِّوَايَةِ. يعني, if you're uncertain if that's going to harm you in any way, then you ask the doctor. Or you ask someone with knowledge. You don't have to be necessarily a doctor. They said, well, this might be riwayah. And if it's riwayah, then you need one. Okay, because that's all it's needed in riwayah. However, if you say it's shahada, then you'll need two. But the mu'tamad is only one. And when we say adl, we mean adl zahir. Yani, he's a Muslim, he's okay. Well, your doctor is not a Muslim, mathalan. So what do you do in that situation? Here in the West, there's like 17 Shafi'i students of knowledge and mashayikh on the group Al-Munaqashat fil Fiqh al-Shafi'i. Run it by them. That would probably make things a little bit easier, because if they tell you, khalas. Naam. He says, وشدة البرد كمرض في جواز التيمم. We have the famous story of Amr ibn al-As, right? Amr ibn al-As, it was too cold, so he made tayammum. And that's شدة البرد. قال في جواز التيمم لها إذا خيف من استعمال الماء المعجوز عن تسخينه. They are unable to heat up the water. Okay? But if you are able, like in this day and age, in many places, I'm not going to say most, but many places, you can heat up the water. It's pretty much the norm in many places. Then you don't have an excuse to move on to tayammum. He says, وَإِذَا امْتَنَعَ اسْتِعْمَالُهُ أي الماء في عضو لعلة, يعني there's a reason for you not to use the water. Okay. إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ عَلَيْهِ سَاتِرٌ وَجَبَ التَّيَمُّمَ وَكَذَا غَسْلُ الصَّحِيحِ عَلَى الْمَذْهَبِ. Okay. So we'll say the issue is in your arm. Okay. And there's nothing, no bandages on the arm. Tamam. How do you make wudu? And you can't get water on the arm. You start your wudu. Once you get to that spot, you go ahead and you make tayammum. You go ahead and you make tayammum. And then you finish your wudu. And then you finish your wudu. He said, وَكَذَا غَسْلُ الصَّحِيحِ عَلَى الْمَذْهَبِ. That sahih is not khilaf. The sahih means the parts of your body that are not sick or not have an issue blocking you from using the water. Okay? So he says, عَلَى الْمَذْهَب. this means that there's a muqabil in حكاية المذهب. The muqabil here says, he says, في وجوب غسله القولان في من وجد الماء ما لا يكفيه. نعم. We spoke about this in our last session. You have an amount of water. It's not enough for wudu. Do you make wudu with it, knowing that's not going to be enough? Or do you just go ahead and move on to tayammum? They said, no, you use the water. You know that's not going to be enough. And once you're done, then you do tayammum. Because now you don't have water officially. Okay? He's saying, so Tariq al-Thani is saying, no. It has two qawl here. One qawl is the same as what was mentioned. The second qawl says what? It says you already know that you can't use the water. Like in the other example, it wasn't enough water. Here, you know you can't use the water. So just go ahead and make tayammum. What's the point? Why are you going to do wudu, tayammum, and then finish wudu? What is this? This makes no sense. That's the other opinion saying that. He says, ذكر ذلك في شرح المهذب وذكر في الدقائق أنه عدل عن قول المحرر غسل الصحيح والصحيح أنه يتيمم إلى ما في المنهاج لأنه الصواب. In المحرر, he says غسل الصحيح, then he says والصحيح أنه يتيمم in المحرر. And again, with the ease of the internet, we can open up al-Muharrar and read it right from there. Okay, here we go. In al-Muharrar, he says, وَإِنِ امْتَنِعَ اسْتِعْمَالُ الْمَاءِ فِي بَعْضِ أَعْضَائِهِ دُونَ بَعْضٍ لِجِرَاحَةٍ وَنَحْوِهَا, a bandage, right, surgery, something like that. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ عَلَيْهِ سَاتِرٌ, if there's no bandages, right, غَسَلَ الصَّحِيحِ, and then do what? And then he's going to do tayammum for that which he couldn't wash. He says, وَالصَّحِيحُ أَنَّهُ يَتَيَمَّمُ مَعَ ذَلِكَ. Okay, well, what's the issue here? Al-Imam al-Nawawi in al-Daqa'iq, he said, you could misunderstand what should be said here. Why? Imam al-Nawawi says, realistically, there's no debate that tayammum is going to be done here because there's a limb we can't wash. There's no khilaf. But the way he said it, as in, وَالصَّحِيحُ أَنَّهُ يَتَيَمَّمْ مَعَ ذَلِكَ, this could be taken as in, you don't have to wash, you just do tayammum. So Imam Nawawi's argument in al-Daqa'iq is that the opposite could be understood of what was meant to be said. Kalam Jameel. طيب. Then the tayammum, there's no way around it. That's a fact. We're doing it. قال زاد في الروضة لئلا يبقى موضع الكسر بلا طهارة. The tayammum is for the عضو that has the علة. وقال لم أرى خلافا في وجوب التيمم لأحد من أصحابنا. No one ever differed on that part. The differing came on using the water in the first place. That's where has always been khilaf. The tayammum is a fact. There's no debate there. قال ويتلطف في غسل الصحيح المجاور للعليل بوضع خرقة مبلولة بقربه. So that way you don't cause any harm to yourself, instead of washing around the illah, the problem that you have, maybe get a washcloth, wet it, and run it gently around it so you do not cause yourself any harm. The Sharia will never allow, accept, guide, instruct you to harm yourself ever. قال ويتحامل عليها لينغسل بالمتقاطر منها ما حواليها من غير أن يسيل إليه. You can squeeze the washcloth, let the water run on those parts. ولا ترتيب بينهما أي بين التيمم والغسل للجنب وجوبا. There's no ترتيب there. والأولى, however, it's best لو التقديم أو تقديم التيمم ليزيل الماء أثر التراب، ذكره في شرح المهذب في الجنب ونحوه في المحدث. فإن كان من به العلة محدثا, so before the issue came about, so someone was on a bike مثلا, right, and they did not have their tahara and they broke their arm, what are we going to do? Well, if he goes to the hospital, we're pretty sure and certain that he's not going to be like, wait, let me go make wudu before you start putting the bone back in, patching me up, right? Not going to happen. So what's going to be our course of action here? He said, فَالْأَصَحُ اشْتِرَاطُ التَّيَمُّمِ وَقْتَ غَسْلِ الْعَلِيلِ. In the previous scenario, that tartib we mentioned is not wajib. Like I said, make wudu. Once you get to the limb with the issue, make tayammum, right? Then continue wudu. That's not a shart. That's okay. Here, it is a shart that there was hadath. Kalam Jameel. He says, so you have to start your wudu normally. Once you get to the limb with the issue, you do your tayammum, then you finish your wudu. رعاية لترتيب الوضوء. والثاني يتيمم. الثاني here is مقابل الأصح. يتيمم متى شاء كالجنب. ليش؟ قال لأن التيمم عبادة مستقلة. تيمم is its own thing. We're telling him now to put tayammum, which is its own thing, in the middle of wudu, which is its own thing as well. Kalam Jameel. Tartib technically has to do with the integrals of one ibadah. والترتيب إنما يراعي أو يراعى في العبادة الواحدة. في العبادة الواحدة. One might argue with probably like 6,000 different examples that that's not necessarily always the case. That there are different ibadat that might consist of scenarios. You might need a little thinking, but probably majority of hajj would be like that. But they're independent acts. And then of course this will come up to the another mas'ala actually altogether that would be very powerful here, and that is, what is wudu? Is wudu a set of independent acts that if done collectively you are called mutawaddi? Because if that's the case, then that argument there is out the window, because those are independent acts and tartib is wajib between them, right? Because if you're making wudu, right, and you wash your hand is now in the state of tahara. It's now in the state of tahara. Oh, but the mu'tamad says that you cannot touch the mushaf yet. Yes, because the condition of the mushaf is that you are mutatahhir. You are mutawaddi. Tamam? Not your hand. No, you. Your hand is not called mutawaddi. It's called mutatahhir or tatahhara. Tamam? He says, فَإِن جُرِحَ عُضْوَاهُ أي المحدث فَتَيَمُّمَانِ على الأصح المذكور. Based on the asah, then you're going to need a tayammum for each limb once you get to that limb. ممتاز. قال وعلى الثاني مقابل الأصح says what? تيمم واحد. كلام جميل. ليش واحد؟ Because tayammum is good for it all. That's what tayammum is there for, right? It's a substitution. Why would you repeat two substitutions? قال وكل من اليدين والرجلين كعضو واحد ويندب أن يجعل كل واحدة كعضو. كلام جميل. قال وإن كان بالعضو ساتر أن عفوا, that last segment I'll remind you with it once we get into arkan al-tayammum, because it's going to come up again. That's why he didn't comment on it, he just stopped there. Okay, you'll see when we start speaking about the arkan of tayammum why he just did that. وكل من اليدين والرجلين كعضو واحد, and it's only sunnah to treat them all يعني individual, the hands and the feet. You'll see inshallah. نعم. قال وإن كان بالعضو ساتر, but if there is a bandage or a cast كجبيرة لا يمكن نزعها. جبيرة is a cast. That's not a bandage, that's a cast. You can't take it off. قال لا يمكن نزعها بأن يخاف منه محظور مما سبق. And remember those lines, محظور مما سبق, because that's what they say when they're mentioning things. Well, they'll say يخاف محظور التيمم. What is محظور التيمم? The three things mentioned above. مرض يخاف معه من استعمال العضو. بطء البر, the healing process would be extended. أو الشين الفاحش في عضو ظاهر. Those are called محظورات التيمم. He says غسل الصحيح وتيمم كما سبق, with all of the khilaf, بما فيه من الخلاف وما يترتب عليه من المسائل السابقة. He says, however, وفي التيمم هنا قول إنه لا يجب مع وجوب غسل الصحيح. لا يجب, يعني في قول that says this is not واجب, as long as you're doing what? غسل الصحيح ومسح الجبيرة بالماء. Okay? He says والقول بعدم وجوب غسل الصحيح هو على القول بوجوب التيمم اكتفاء به. So that قول that says you don't need to do غسل الصحيح, not just, when they say الصحيح here, they're not just speaking about the limb. No, they're actually speaking about the entirety of the rest of the body that doesn't have an issue with it. Kalam Jamil. He says that what that opinion is stating is saying that khalas, yani one tayammum kind of solves all of the above. There shouldn't be any other discussions. That's the other opinion argues. He says والرافع في الشرح حكى في قسم الساتر في وجوب غسل الصحيح الطريقين وفي وجوب التيمم القولين, ثم قال في قسم عدم الساتر غسل الصحيح وفي وجوب التيمم الخلاف السابق في القسم الأول. All of that just goes back to trying to define the details of the khilaf, which brings us to a very important mas'ala, and that is Imam al-Nawawi, he tries to bundle up the khilaf as much as possible. A lot of times, the bundling itself doesn't make sense until you are aware of all of the details involved. This is why you'll see a lot of people when they're reading verses of Minhaj, they'll come and say, مقابله كذا. مقابل what? They'll say مقابل العبارة. Okay, but which part of the عبارة? you need to know all of the details of the mas'ala to understand what Imam al-Nawawi did. And again, such things take a lifetime without a doubt, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. قال والجبيرة ألواح تهيأ للكسر والانخلاع تجعل على موضعه. Basically the old way of putting a cast around a broken bone, right? The pieces of wood stacked around the arm and then you wrap on it. That was their old cast system. واللصوق, you could do بالضم and you could do بالفتح. لصوق and لصوق. It just means bandages in general. Whether it's gauze and tape or just gauze or what have you. Things like pressure bandage bands and things like that, they would not be included in this discussion. He says ما تحتاج إليه الجراحة من خرقة أو قطنة ونحوهما وله ولمحله حكم الجبيرة ومحلها فيما تقدم وما سيأتي ويجب مع ذلك مسح كل جبيرته بماء. نعم. Some people from our ashab back in the early days, they assumed when it was said mashul jabira, they assumed it was with the turab. Our ashab said no, you're doing mashul jabira bil ma. So there's a bandage, you get to it while you're making wudu, you wet your hand and then you run it over. Of course you could shake your hand out a little bit, you just want to get water to the bandage, even if a few driplets. Why? إذا أمرتكم بأمر فأتوا به ما استطعتم. That's the hadith of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. قال استعمالا للماء ما أمكن. وقيل بعضها كالخف. بعضها كالخف. يعني in the khuf, when you wipe on it, you're just wiping the top. I mean, that's pretty much it, right? Everything else is really just extra. But أقله مسمى المسح. لأعلى الخف, not the sides, not the edges, not the bottom, not the heel, but to the top. So they said the khuf was there for a reason. Well, the jabira is there for a reason too. So you could just wipe some of it like you would do with the khuf, but that's weak. قال ولا يتأقت مسحها. يعني the jabira, since we mentioned khuf has 24 hours for a person that's a resident and 3 days for a traveler. Here we don't have that scenario for the jabira, because if you have a bandage or a cast on, that's going to stay on until you're better, right? ويمسح الجنوب متى شاء. نعم, if they're junub, they can do it whenever they want. لا ترتيب, because there's no ترتيب الغسل. What about the muhdith? That's wudu. There is tartib. So he does it when وقت غسل العليل. قال واحترز بماء عن التراب فلا يجب مسحها به. نعم, لا حاجة لذلك. لماذا؟ Because you don't wipe with that. تيمم طهارة ضعيفة. It won't extend beyond what it's being used for. فلا يجب مسحها به إذا كانت في محل التيمم. What's محل التيمم؟ الوجه واليدين. قال ويشترط فيها ليكتفي بالأمور الثلاثة المذكورة ألا تأخذ من الصحيح إلا ما لا بد منه للاستمساك. This is called قدر الاستمساك. What is قدر الاستمساك? Any bandage or even cast will usually have a little bit extra than where the wound is. If it's a bandage, they'll put the bandage a little bit bigger than the wound, right? And that way the tape can go around it, right? Cast, يعني it might go maybe an inch in both directions, right? To create that stability that the bone needs to heal. تمام? That's called قدر الاستمساك. If it goes beyond what it normally needs, then we have a problem. And we're going to see the problem in a moment. But that's a problem. قال ولو قدر على غسله. Now, if you can wash that part, this is best. Like what? He gives us an example. خرقة مبلولة عليه ويعصرها لينغسل بالمتقاطر منها. Sometimes in the last few weeks of a cast, it's kind of just sitting on the arm. It's moving. You can even move it around a little bit, right? You just want to still keep it on for a couple more weeks. But you could put things in the cast. All right? Put things in the cast. Play with it. Shake it around, move it around. Well, that's good because you can wet a washcloth and then run it down your arm and squeeze it so the water can run underneath the cast. If that's possible, do it. You'll see why in a moment. قال وسيأتي أن الجبيرة إن وضعت على طهر لم يجب القضاء أو على حدث وجب. And this is one of those problems where even the legendary scholars of our school decided to depart from the mu'tamad and have their own ikhtiyar. Okay? And we'll see shortly. And it goes back to the issue of if the bandage or the cast was put on and you weren't able to take it off, you weren't able to wash those, then by default, once it is removed, you have to make up everything you prayed with it on. Imam al-Muzani said, no, you don't. Al-Imam al-Nawawi, he has an ikhtiyar where he said also, no, you don't. But the mu'tamad is that you do. هذا هو المعتمد. And that discussion will come. كلام جميل. سترى الآن. He says, فإذا تيمم المذكور لفرض ثان. Now, person prayed, خلاص, another prayer came, and they did tayammum again. بأن أدى بطهارته السابقة, what? He prayed. كلام جميل. How many prayers can you pray with it? هي صلاة واحدة. Because that tayammum is only good for what? Only good for one faridah. That is the rule of tayammum. لا يؤدي به غير فرض ونوافل without any restrictions. قال ولم يحدث, يعني he had no حدث. لم يعد الجنب غسلا. The junub won't have to do a ghusl if he didn't have a hadath. لما غسله. ويعيد المحدث. But if the person is muhdith, غسل ما بعد عليله حيث كان رعاية للترتيب. وقيل يستأنفان, يعني they make the ghusl again and the wudu again. ويأتي المحدث بالتيمم in its proper location. كلام جميل. قال وهذا مخرج من قول قدم في ماسح الخف أنه إذا نزعه وانتهت المدة وهو بطهر المسح توضأ. Let's explain this one more time because this is important. Okay. فهو بيقول لو الشخص هذا not a محدث, يعني he was محدث before, right? He was junub, he did a ghusl, He did tayammum. There's no tartib there, right? Now he wants to pray another prayer. Another prayer came in. Tamam? He's not muhdith. He's not muhdith. What does he have to do? He has to do tayammum. He doesn't have to do ghusl. Okay, because he's not muhdith. Khalas. Why does he have to do tayammum though? Because tayammum is only good for one fard. Okay. What if they are muhdith? What if the individual is indeed muhdith? What do they do? Tayammum. That's it. And it was said no. And afwan, tayammum and wash what is after. Not what's before. The tayammum would be suffice. غسل ما بعد عليله. رعاية لماذا؟ For the ترتيب. قيل يستأنفان يعني no. Do it all over again. The whole action. Why? They said, remember in مسح الخف? Yes. When you take the khuf off, what do? You wash your feet. That's the mu'tamad, right? What's muqabil mu'tamad? The muqabil says, la, you do wudu all over again. That's if you took the khuf off in its time or the time ended. Said, no, you do wudu all over again. Well, I wasn't muhdith. Why do I have to do wudu all over again? They say, you took your khuf off. That's a weak opinion. This opinion here that's weak came from that weak opinion there. He said, what should takhrij? The way that this was built was, they said, الطهارة في كل منهما مركب من أصل وضوء or غسل and بدل تيمم. جميل. And that's the same over there. قال وقد بطل الأصل ببطلان البدل. He only had one tayammum per one faridah, right? He prayed already. This is another one. So the badal has now been disturbed. Well, what about the asl, the wudu? Well, it's disturbed as well because the tayammum was done in the middle of a wudu. So they're both disturbed. Therefore, you have to do it all over again. وقيل المحدث كجنب فلا يعيد غسل ما بعد عليله لبقاء طهارته إذ ينتقل بها. Oh, then what does he do? قال وإنما يعيد التيمم لضعفه عن أداء الفرض. The third opinion says لا 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 شوف هو ماذا سيفعل؟ ماذا عليه؟ يتيمم. That's it. Why? On what basis? Because he has ajz. He has ajz. So if he has ajz, then he should be able to just simply go right to the rukhsah. Imam al-Nawawi says, قلت هذا الثالث أصح والله أعلم. نعم. هذا هو الأصح. لا يجب عليه غسل ما بعد العليل. All he has to do is tayammum. المحدث كالجنب. What did we say about the junub earlier? We said لم يعد الجنب غسلا. ماذا يفعل؟ تيمم. قال واحترز بقوله ولم يحدث عما إذا أحدث فإنه كما سبق يغسل الصحيح من أعضاء الوضوء ويتيمم عن العليل منها وقت غسله ويمسح الجبيرة بالماء إن كانت وإن كانت العلة بغير أعضاء الوضوء تيمم الجنب مع الوضوء للجنابة. تمام؟ هذا كلام سهل يعني لا حاجة للتعليق عليه. Here we'll pause بإذن الله. Any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to add those into the Telegram group. We can go over anything again, inshallah ta'ala. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله تعالى لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.